Good afternoon, everybody. How is everybody today? It's Friday, April 11th, 2025. And I am alive and well. It's been a while since I did a Friday reading. So I wanted to thank everybody for joining. And let me go ahead and turn on the chat. And that way I can see what people are saying. I'll be honest, I haven't really been paying too much attention to what's been going on in the world. Um, I know that there's, the tariffs situation was on again, then off again, then on again. So, and that was affecting the stock market and that was affecting the economy, I guess, in real ways. But honestly, I don't think that the 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 tariffs are really what is the issue. I think it's the budget resolution, which is something that JP and I talked about a couple of weeks ago when we went live. Uh, and we talked about the budget reconciliation and then the budget resolution and how that was going to affect the economy, especially over the next decade or so. There's going to be $1 trillion, or I think it's up to 3 trillion taken from the budget. So this is something that we want to pay attention to over the next few years. Thank you for letting me know that it sounds good. Great. So I'm going to read a piece today that is a little personal. It's based on a conversation. It's based on a conversation that I had with a friend of mine yesterday, a good friend. And I was trying to process that here we are in 2025, and these conversations are still happening, which is very sad to me. So let's just get right into it. And then it's not a very long piece. And then maybe afterwards, we'll talk more about the deeper meaning behind it and what it means. So let me share my screen. So I haven't published this yet. It's been a while since I did this. And like, Google Chrome is accessing. Okay, that's new. I'm getting weird messages on my computer. So it's called Phantom World in a Fake Empire. This is what I wrote yesterday. And let me just go ahead and get right into it. So, when lies by omission define your realities, it's hard to know which steps to take to stay alive. And then this is a photo I found, which I thought really represented kind of where we are right now, where we're all sort of living in this cloud. We're not sure what's real. Everything that we're told, everything that we're fed in the media is something that we have to look at from so many different angles, whereas before maybe we just sort of accepted it as, a version of the truth and we could move on. But now it just seems like we're all living in a fog. And I guess that's what they mean when they say fog of war, right? Because that's what happens in wartime situations. There's chaos, there's misinformation, there's disinformation, there's malinformation, and then there's lies by omission, which is what I talk about up here. Sorry, I'm still kind of, not 100%. So if my voice goes in and out, just bear with me. So when lies by omission define your realities, it's hard to know which steps to take to stay alive. So another death. A friend told me that someone he was once close to had recently died suddenly, but there was no social media messaging about the death. It was word of mouth only. All he knew was this person's age, 55, his gender, that he was male, and that his body was discovered lifeless on Monday by the deceased person's sister. My friend couldn't tell me the cause of death because no one told him. He couldn't even tell me how long the deceased had ceased to live. I'm guessing the message to him came across in a text. Hey man, this dude we know, well, he died. And that's it. No further explanation. There isn't even talk about a funeral yet. And at the time of this writing, the body was discovered only 4 days ago. So maybe it's just too soon to talk about memorials or funerals. So the armchair anthropologist that I am rattled off the different reasons that may be the cause of the sudden death. I said if it was suicide and he was being treated for depression and on SSRIs, he could have been struggling with suicidal ideation, which is a common side effect of SSRIs. Side note, I think that's ultimately what Debbie Lusignan died of. She was on some kind of depression medication, and even the most mainstream doctor will tell you that when you are on these medications long term, that they have to be monitored very closely because they do cause suicidal ideation. And I think that's why we have such a high rise of suicide with teenagers, because a lot of teenagers are on these types of drugs as well. So I'm a huge advocate of stopping these drugs altogether. So it could have been that my friend's buddy who was found dead on Monday, it could have been that he was on, depression meds. And as we all know, the depression meds cause a suicidal ideation. So he could have taken his own life based on the meds he was on. I also said he could have been dealing with years of environmental toxins, and without addressing core issues, which are toxins, his body could have a buildup of those toxins, which could have migrated to his vital organs and caused a shutdown or some other health issue. I also said perhaps he allowed himself to get a shot or a series of shots, and these pharmaceutical poisons, also known as vaccines, could have contributed to his death. And I also said, or maybe he was just depressed or out of sorts and took his own life because he couldn't cope, which is happening a lot, I think, with a certain demographic. Men his age who are unemployed are finding themselves in really in a really bad way. They can't really cope with the fact that they're in their mid 50s or early 60s and suddenly out of work. And you know that this has been the running theme over the last couple of months with us here on this platform, because of the job loss that we experienced on February 7th. So we're very familiar with the frustration, the depression, the suicidal thoughts, the anger, the rage that we're seeing coming out of a specific demographic. It's typically men anywhere between age like 40 up to like maybe 65. So because those are that is the age bracket that is targeted, because it's typically that demographic that makes the most money. So obviously corporations, if they're looking to trim the fat, they're going to go after the people that make the most money. So there are a myriad of other reasons why he could have died, and my obsessive mind tends to rattle around the different ideas about what the cause of death could be until I give up and move on. But this post isn't about death. Well, it's sort of about death. Excuse me. It's about the limited information or the withholding of information that could inform the rest of us on how to avoid a death or work through any other tragic circumstances like unemployment or inherited poverty, or why our once iconic urban centers of culture are wasting away to blighted ghettos of disrepair, all remnants of their once vibrant lifeblood abandoned to waste. If the deceased was having a reaction to poisons or toxins, there must be hundreds of thousands of people out there that also may be experiencing the same types of reactions, but no one is telling them what to look out for or what signs or symptoms could indicate an underlying cause. So these people live in silent pain, never speaking about their symptoms and just hope it goes away. If they do go to the doctor, they may be told it's in their head or that it's something trivial, like a cold or a flu, and are sent packing with some antibiotics and pain meds. The problem is the majority of the people who could be experiencing a life-threatening event based on any of the reasons I've listed above as the cause of death don't want to admit that SSRIs cause suicidal ideation, or don't want to admit that vaccines are actually poisons, and don't want to admit that environmental toxins are purposefully pumped into the atmosphere to exterminate the human race. After all, what exactly are in the SAIs, which are stratospheric aerosol injections that are directly sprayed into our skies? So they've fabricated their own fake empire, living in illusions of safety and believe they can just go about living their lives as they always have without addressing these newer, terrible, life-threatening possibilities. They haven't adjusted to the newer fake empire, in other words. So it's really important as we move along in this new world, in this new model, in this new paradigm, that we make these adjustments. We adjust our timelines, we adjust our expectations, and we even adjust our realities. When my husband came home from swimming one day, he sat on the kitchen chair at the kitchen table feeling strangely sick and exhausted, and about 20 minutes later, awakened to find himself on the floor. He had blacked out. Rather than panic or go immediately to the doctor, we retraced his steps. He woke up early, tired, but not ordinary. He drove to the pool. He swam his usual laps. We went over the details of his time at the pool with a fine-tooth comb, and like detectives, we retraced every single move he made. What we finally discovered was that a woman who swam laps in the lane next to him gave off the vibe of someone recently vaccinated. She wore a mask as she walked to her lane and then removed it quickly before jumping in and swimming her laps. Even though we had no proof, we went ahead and lived as though our suspicion and intuition of her being recently vaccinated was an absolute. We based this absolute truth on her behavior. We made an educated guess that he had picked up her poison, that somehow the poison or her vaccine we assumed that she had injected into her body was somehow transmitting to him. Based on that educated guess, we knew what foods to eat, what supplements to take, and what teas to drink in order to remove the poisons from his body, or at least protect him from the poison making him really sick. And we assumed that he had been poisoned because of the way he blacked out. He fell flat on his face in the kitchen. And many people at the time were falling flat on their face. You know, those videos and images were captured and trending on social media at the time. And we were all led to believe it was because of a mass poisoning. So when the same thing happened to me on January 28th of this year, it was the same day we returned home from New Orleans. I blacked out. My head bounced off the side of a metal canister, our trash can. There is a permanent dent in the top of the can as a result of my head bouncing off of it. We deduced that it was a toxic event as a result of being in New Orleans and the recent once in 800 lifetimes snow event that had blanketed the Gulf Coast just days before. So, if you guys recall, hi, CV, nice to see you. If you guys recall, we had snow back in, I guess it was January, yeah. And I think I remember telling you that, the world had sort of gone sideways and upside down, and I was having a hard time. Uh, I was having a hard time reconciling this reality. I I felt like I was losing my grip on reality, to be honest. When you move to the Gulf Coast and you live in a climate like this, and you're just a couple of blocks from the Gulf of Mexico, the last thing in the world that you would ever expect to see is 12 inches of snow accumulating outside your front door. So it was very weird. It was very weird. Let me continue. When I told my friend in California the other day about this once in 800 lifetimes event of snow blanketing the Gulf Coast, he said, "Wow, I didn't even hear about it on the news." Well, imagine that. The news blacking out how an entire region was experiencing an event that has never happened in 800 lifetimes. It was reminiscent of another event that happened about 20 years ago that the news also failed to cover. We had visited New Orleans just after this raging, toxic snowfall. You see, we assumed the snowfall was unnatural, hence toxic, because it doesn't snow in subtropical settings like the Gulf Coast. So we assumed the snow was engineered. And we also assume that engineered snow is a result of chemical compounds and unnatural permeations in the air and atmosphere. So that was our first clue, which would account for my January 28th blackout. Toxic, unnatural snow. Our second clue was that while we were in New Orleans, the city was under a boil water advisory. So all restaurants, hotels, and any public spaces were handing out bottled water because the water system had shown signs of some sort of toxin or a buildup of bacteria, we were told, perhaps because of freezing pipes or the shutdown of systems as a result of the once in 800 lifetimes unnatural snow event. Despite drinking bottled water, we were showering with tap water, and the first night we actually brushed our teeth with tap water. So this too could have led to me blacking out on January 28th. I developed a troubling cough, but was also hosting an out of town guest and couldn't really focus on my wellness until about 3 or 4 weeks after the January 28th fall. When I finally had the time to focus, take time off from this platform, and really dig deep, I realized it was an inflammatory event exacerbated by my autoimmune illness I was diagnosed with in 1977. Death was imminent. Radical changes had to be made. I was concerned every night for months that my husband would find my lifeless body lying next to him when he woke up in the morning. I cut out all toxins and started an expensive regime of supplements, clean foods, teas, and powders. This was difficult since my husband had lost his job due to his department being closed on February 7th. I stopped all physical activity. My heart was failing, and even slow walks could push it over the edge. There were no doctors involved in this diagnosis. It was just my own intuition and the help of family and friends who gave as much advice as they could. Plus, I've spent my entire life learning about my body and what it needs to survive and thrive. You may have heard me speak in the past about how I was diagnosed in 1977 and I was told that I probably wouldn't live to see age 20, and that the thing that they were very concerned about was my heart, that to keep an eye on my heart. So, And I've never really had I've had, irregular heartbeats and some other issues, but nothing like the inflammation around the heart that I was experiencing, which is pericarditis. So obviously I had to be really careful and focused on how to bring my inflammatory responses, just bring them down. So again, there were no doctors involved in this diagnosis. It was just my own intuition and the help of family and friends who gave as much advice as they could. Plus, I've spent my entire life learning about my body and what it needs to survive and thrive. But if I were a different person, like my friend's buddy whose lifeless body was found on Monday, I would probably be dead by now. If I lived my life by responding to these events as if they were outside events that didn't affect me personally and associated my blacking out as something unrelated, I'd be dead right now. So I feel like I feel like I really want to drive this point home. In the before time, when it was less of a fake empire like it is now, when it was less of a phantom existence, in the before time, um, weather or certain events that took place um, outside your front door wouldn't necessarily affect your personal health in very real ways. Like you wouldn't die. Um, but I'm now in this place where I think that we are poisoning each other, not willfully. So you've got the the vaccinated poisoning people through existing. Some of them, not everyone. I think some of them just got placebos, right? So you've got this transmission going on. So that's one way. And then you've also got this incredibly toxic and poisonous emissions that are coming from these stratospheric aerosol injections. Some people call them chemtrails, whatever. You can see them. They're everywhere. They're crisscrossing in the sky all the time. And so they're blanketing the earth with poisons. And I just don't think that we can live in this space of naivety anymore. We can't be so naive to think that our health is not affected by these outside circumstances. I used to think that, you know, it's easy for us to say, um, well, if I eat this bad food, then obviously I'm going to get sick, and so that's something that you're doing to yourself, and it's your own. It's kind of like your own fault. But I think at this point, we have to start accepting the fact that there are so many things being done to us. And if they would just leave us alone, if they would just stop vaccinating babies and adults would stop going and getting their shots. And if they would stop spraying the skies, if they would just leave us alone, most of us who live a really healthy life and eat organic foods and drink lots of water and don't drink alcohol and don't smoke, most of us would probably live to see, 120. You know what I'm saying? Like we would live really long, healthy lives. But I guess that's not the goal, right? So if I were a different person, like my friend's buddy whose lifeless body was found on Monday, I would probably be dead by now. I just imagine that my friends, and I'm just talking, I'm not reading right now, but I just imagine that my friend's buddy um, didn't associate toxic weather events with, like, if he was feeling poorly, he wouldn't make that connection. But I do. So the fake empire of illusion is killing people just as much as the toxins pumped into our atmosphere or slammed into our veins is killing people. Lying by omission and not sharing with people what is happening in our world is an indictment. And how those happenings are affecting us personally is also an indictment. But an indictment of whom or of what? Of all of us, I guess. We can't live our life based on what we were always taught. We're living in a fake empire, and this fake empire is now inverted. I mentioned my husband's department was closed on February 7th, and as a result, he became unemployed. Pardon me. This tragedy had its own set of illusions to contend with. Millions of professionals are still living under a fake empire and refusing to admit that the jobs they believe they're applying for just aren't there. This is the ultimate fake empire where hundreds of thousands of unemployed applicants, usually in the professional sector, are meandering through company websites and applying to job after job after job that these companies are claiming to need filled, but it's all just a smokescreen and no one is telling them the truth. In the same way, my husband and I diagnosed our health emergencies as a result of outside toxins, we use the same principles to diagnose the unemployment situation. Just like with our health protocols, we give ourselves a timeline and decide when we will be healthy again. He lost his job on February 7th, so I said, "You will have a new job on April 7th. 2 months on the bench is all our finances could handle. After donations and gifts and unemployment, I knew we could not go past April 7th. Just like when you have to look within first and analyze what it is about your lifestyle and your habits and even your sleep patterns or how you behave when you're awake. We also had to look within during this next crisis of unemployment. So he spent a week updating his portfolio and resume and evaluating his skills. And he did. So it was like he put himself into a bubble and he just focused for one whole week on updating his portfolio, just sprucing up his website, reframing how, his skill set, his skill level, uh, re, evaluating everything. So hundreds of rejection emails later, and diagnosing that about 90% of the jobs that he was applying for were phantom or ghost jobs, we tried a different route. We stopped applying on company websites and spoke only to recruiters. We'd always had good luck with recruiters, finding him temporary contract work for months or even years at a time. So we set to work finding recruiters, communicating with them firsthand, and submitting his resumes and his portfolio and his website into their direct emails. This only helped to a certain point. We discovered that recruiters were also fielding ghost jobs or phantom jobs and were equally frustrated why so many applicants were being rejected outright. So here is just one example of the many hundreds of posts from recruiters one might see trending on a LinkedIn feed. 30 interviews and still no one is hired. Yet another friend, recruiter, telling me that she cannot find good talent. So my thinking is, if you interviewed 30 people and did not hire someone, maybe it's time to start looking in the mirror. The problem is many recruiters and hiring managers are searching for the perfect candidate. And newsflash, there is no perfect candidate. If you have someone with the right attitude and skill set and they fit in with the team, then why not hire them? There are so many qualified individuals still job searching. Yet I see the same jobs being reposted over and over again and being left vacant for months. So that's key right there. I'll break that comment down or that sentence down in a minute. So who took a chance on you? Maybe it's time you took a chance on someone. Agree? So, of all the reactions, 1,992 and counting, and all the comments, 302 and counting, and the reposts, 116 and counting, not one person is telling the truth or explaining how the entire system is based on a smokescreen and fraud. When you can ascertain what the core problem is with your health, you can start to change your habits or incorporate healing qualities into your life so that you'll survive the health event and possibly even thrive once you break through to the other side of it. But without this core truth, you're destined to look everywhere else. And meanwhile, you're getting worse and worse. And eventually, you might just die. In the case above, the recruiters are busy blaming themselves for being too picky with candidates. The hiring managers are blaming the recruiters for not presenting them with quality candidates. The candidates or the applicants are blaming the recruiters for not trying to sell them to the hiring managers, and the recruiters are blaming the applicants for not having the right kind of resumes and portfolios. And yet, no one is telling the truth or going to the core issue. The whole concept of unemployment is now an industry unto itself, and it has nothing to do with filling allegedly empty positions. This takes you back to this sentence right here. Yet I see the same jobs being reposted over and over again and being left vacant for months. As long as the company advertises that they need these positions filled, then they will continue to receive the funding from their funding stream or their funding source. As long as the companies field these jobs out to the recruiting agencies or the temp agencies, then the recruiters will have a job to do, which is to fill the candidates in the roles that are allegedly empty. This is a smokescreen of opportunity, an illusion of hope, and an illusion of job security in the fake empire that obfuscates the truth and tells lies by omission. Once we came to this conclusion, I'll admit, panic started to set in. We couldn't survive on my husband being a Lyft driver or a part time worker at Home Depot or at the local grocery store. Minimum wage jobs seem to be the only real jobs out there. And even then, it's difficult to get someone to talk to you. What retailer is going to take a chance on a person with a 25-year plus career in the professional sector? When diagnosing a life-threatening health event, your unique background and your unique body will not respond to treatments in the same way others with similar threatening events are experiencing. When my husband blacked out, his health protocol was very different from my health protocol. Just because we both blacked out due to toxic exposure doesn't mean we could be treated in the same way. He's male, I'm female. I have a long-term autoimmune illness since childhood. He does not. We needed an individuated, unique response to our health emergencies. The pragmatist in me utilized this same process when diagnosing my husband's unemployment. There are quite a few people in his field, which has become more popular over the years. What set him apart, though, is that he was part of the small group of designers that entered the field at the very start of its inception. Still, though, he needed another edge. Decades of experience in mastering the craft still didn't set him apart enough. He needed something wholly unique to him individually that could heal this latest troubling issue that had entered our lives: unemployment. We discovered through deep research that my husband is the only person in his field that exists in the state we reside in. Once we discovered this, we had the formula. I did a generic search on his title and specifically targeted our region. We discovered the formula that inoculated him and healed him of the deadly epidemic of unemployment. We found a company an hour away that is looking for someone exactly like him. They were beyond excited to suddenly receive his resume in their inbox, and within 1 week, he was offered the job. Now, Scott Adams calls this a reframe, and although I may not agree with everything he says or where he puts his faith, I cannot deny that the reframed has changed our lives. A reframe is vital in this day and age. He calls it a reframe. I call it stepping out of your old way of thinking, turning yourself upside down, and existing in inverted chaos. This empire is so fake. Never before in your life would you believe that an injection issued by your doctor would actually masquerade as a poison, or that a cloud would masquerade as a toxin, or that applying for a job would masquerade as guaranteeing your continued unemployment. But there we have it. Stepping out of the old ways of thinking, reframing your existence down to your core, deciding once and for all what your timeline will be, will ensure your survival. If not, you're nothing more than a discarded carcass that winds up in someone's text message with no explanation on how you got there. So that is it. And what I can do is I'll make it live after I'm done here. But I feel that there's I feel that there's a lot of advice or a lot of you know speculation on what's the best way to live a life. And let me go ahead and just pull myself back up. Hello. And I think that the simplest things that you can do are the things that really matter. Get up in the morning and make your bed every day. I recently read an article. It was about waking up at 5:00. And there's, in the article, they called it the 5 a.m. club. And JP wakes up every day at 5 a.m. And he gets up and he either goes to the pool, so he will get up at 5 a.m. and he will have a bag, which he has prepared the night before, of, his swimming stuff, like his towel and things like that. And he will ride his bike to the pool and he will swim some laps and then he will ride his bike home, so that he makes it back in time to start work at 8:00. Okay, so having a ritual, setting goals for yourself and keeping a list. These all they don't seem very exciting, but it works. I have this really intense regimen of supplements and foods that I eat in order to keep myself healthy. And so people ask me, "You seem better. What are you doing?" And I'm like, it's overwhelming. So I usually just say, well, I take CoQ10 and I drink pomegranate juice and I try to eat organic, and everything that I eat that's protein is grass fed, that kind of thing. And I eat lean meats, So, because I don't want to overwhelm people, because it's a lot. It's a lot that I do. And I'm thinking to myself, just because I do something doesn't mean that it's going to work for you. Just because JP wakes up at 5 in the morning every day, and if on the days that he's not at the pool, he's doing like his yoga stretches and doing the water rower here at the house, that doesn't necessarily mean it'll work for me. I'm a different person. So I hesitate to give advice or tell people how to live their life based on what I'm doing for myself, because it might not work for them. I'm also, concerned with the fact that this individual who passed away on Monday, I didn't know him, but my friend did. And they were close at one point and then lost touch. You know what happens when you grow up. And, he's the kind of person that grew up in one place. So he has friends from childhood that he still talks to. Um, it, but people aren't adjusting. They're not adjusting um, their lives around this new normal and this new model toxic toxic events. I mean, even financial events. People think that that they can continue to live like they always have when we're at, really extraordinarily high inflation right now. Um you can't. And so in order to make it, you have to do a thing and that helps you see how unique you are. If you can speak a second language, that always helps, like as far as looking for work, or if you're traveling and you want to maybe have a second home in another country, learning that language is probably a good idea, uh, or just knowing it. Something has to set you apart, and you also have to reframe all failures as potential successes, and it sounds a little Pollyanna-ish and a little too naive, but it does help. The job that JP left, not it was a choice, turned out to be um, it turned out to be a good thing. It turned out to be a blessing in disguise. The job that he's at right now, that he's been at this whole week, um, the he really likes the people. They treat him with real respect. They have high hopes for him. They're saying things. Uh, they're saying things like, "We're really, really relieved to have you on board." And thank you, Carlos. Thank you for that. Um, we're still, in the 90-day stretch, so it's only been a week. We aren't really going to be able to breathe out and feel safe until the first week of July, once his 90 days are up. And there's a lot more involved with this job than the past job. He's in a higher he's a manager now, so it's a different kind of expectations. There's reviews. He hasn't been reviewed in a decade. So, there's a lot to um there's a lot of changes regarding the job that he'll have to adjust to. So, it might be difficult, the adjustment, but I think we can get through it. Just having a job is sometimes not the answer. The real challenge is to keep the job, right? It's like, well, it's like being married. It's easy to fall in love and meet someone and marry them. The real challenge is to stay married to them during the difficult times, during the really hard times, right? So we have the job. We're very happy for it. Now the challenge is to keep the job and make sure that he can meet those expectations. And I think that's how we have to treat um, life right now. Except everything is so inverted. Um, so recently, we found out yesterday, and I'm sure you've all seen the headlines, that the CEO of Siemens out of Spain was doing one of those tourist helicopter rides with his family, and it crashed into the Hudson River in New York City, and everybody on board perished. So it was the pilot, the CEO, the CEO's wife, and their three kids. And my immediate response was that some sort of health event must have happened with the pilot, and that he must have experienced something uh, that caused him to lose control of the aircraft. Maybe he blacked out. That still happens. It happened to me on January 28th, right? So it still happens. So as the day went on, though, I started speculating when I found out that the CEO he had the same last name as Pablo Escobar, which is the famous drug king out of Colombia. You guys can look him up. So my mind started to go to all these different places. And the fact that this particular CEO of Siemens was really well loved by employees. He would go out to different plants and different um, locations that were having trouble performing. And once he was there and spent time with the employees, things would turn around and their performance would go up. So he must have been very inspiring, which tells me that he was probably a very well loved executive. And I'm thinking to myself, ask yourself, what is everybody telling you that the new um, high performing companies will be adopting in order to perform well? AI, right? Robotics. They think that robotics can replace somebody like this CEO who was able to really turn things around for various plants or departments that were having trouble performing. So I thought maybe they want to get rid of him because this in today's world it's all about AI, it's all about machine learning, it's all about robotics. So maybe they wanted to get rid of him. So my mind went into every other you know every other place except focusing on the core issue, which is that something happened to the aircraft, or it went out of control and it crashed. Why would that happen? That would happen because something must have happened to the pilot, because I don't think that the company that runs these helicopters is going to. I think these helicopters go through a lot of checks, and they make sure that before they go on their tours and stuff, that they're perfect, right? So they go through the safety checks is what I'm saying. So the only way that this aircraft could have lost control is if the pilot himself lost control of the aircraft, and the only way that that would happen is if he somehow became incapacitated. So I'm thinking that the simplest answer in this particular story is probably the correct one, that the pilot had a health emergency or a health event and continued to do a dangerous job without paying attention to the world around him. You can't fly an aircraft in this day and age without acknowledging the fact that there's toxins in the environment that could really affect you. There's toxins coming from people who are vaccinated that can really affect you. You can't continue to live your life as if everything's fine. Continue to do your job like you always have. So and this is where the news and this is where doctors and this is where, so many people um, have failed us. That's why podcasts exist, I guess. That's why you have doctors, screaming into the void to try to warn people. You can't live your life like you have before. You have to make those changes. Um, you have to start taking things that will pull the toxins out of your body, you know, whatever those things are. Pull the metals from your body, pull the poisons from you know, from your bloodstream. Get it out of you because you can't continue to live this way and expect to survive. So I didn't mean for this to be so depressing, but I think that's sort of the theme of my piece today that I wrote and that I read earlier. Phantom World and a Fake Empire is that we're not paying attention to this new world and we're continuing to live our life, you know, and we gotta make some changes. It starts within. And each individual is going to have to make their individual changes. Like what works for me isn't going to work for you. What works for you isn't going to work for your friends. I have a friend who has to be outside a lot for his job. And he is outside in rain, in snow, in brutally hot weather, in really, really sub-zero, temperatures. And I think that has actually helped his immune system. I don't know if it would work for me, you know. Um, I have another friend who has a tea ritual. She drinks a a cup of tea at a specific time every day, not a minute before, not a minute later, and you can set your watch to it. That may not work for me either, but we have to create these little rituals and we have to do these things and operate, you know, treat our bodies with a lot of kindness and be the best we can be in this really toxic environment. And it's hard too because it's not just health, it's also the economy, it's also the lack of jobs. There are a lot of people unemployed, more than you're being told. And they're all running around in circles looking for work. Um, in the same way that they've always looked for work, and they think that doing the same thing over and over again is going to produce a better result, right? And so we know that that's the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over again, it doesn't work, and just you keep doing it thinking that maybe this time it will work. So what we did regarding unemployment is we changed it up a lot. We were 2 months on the bench, and so we started with, applying to jobs directly at the companies. That didn't work, so we switched it up a month later. We started talking to recruiters, and we always kept in this idea that we were going to do remote work because there's not a lot of need for what he does for a living here on the Gulf Coast. Well, that wasn't working either. Recruiters were coming up empty and he was getting passed over for interviews and stuff. So we decided to switch it up again towards the end of March and it worked. I was like, I don't accept that, my husband being the only one of his kind in this state that we live in. I don't accept that is, something that people are just going to wave away. And this company recognizes his value. And eventually something, if they hadn't picked him up, then somebody else would. And I think they knew that. And so they made the offer. So you got to reframe, you got to change your way of thinking. You have to do a lot of soul searching, a lot of shadow work, a lot of introspection, a lot of meditating, prayer, things like that, in order to function in this new upside down fake empire. That's what you have to do. So JP put a comment on the live stream here that says, watch our video, The Reason. It's pretty good. I would definitely check it out. It's a short one. And I'll probably come back next Friday. Next Friday is the 18th. Yeah. So I was looking at my calendar. So yeah, I'll probably come by and do this again next Friday. Maybe have something else to read, or maybe I'll write something and read it again. Probably around the same time, 2:00 or so in the afternoon, Central Time. I have more to say about this sudden death that my friend experienced. He didn't die, of course, but his buddy died. The age and the demographic seems to be the popular trend right now, and everything I've experienced kind of tells me that they're really going after the 50 somethings now. The 50 somethings are being targeted, especially men. So, and there's a reason for that, right? Anyway, there's that involves a longer discussion. So I'll go ahead and sign off now. I want to thank you for joining. And if you want to email me, the email is info@book-of-hours.com. You can certainly email me and we can have a chat. I really appreciate you tuning in and listening and commenting. Thank you for that. And I will see you next Friday. Okay. Probably around 2:00. I'm still dealing with low energy, but every day I'm getting a little bit better. So that's good, right? Okay. We'll see you next week. Have a great weekend. Bye.
You can help us continue our work by becoming a patron at patreon.com/bookofhours, or leave us a one-time donation at paypal.me/bookofhours. Or you can use Cash App. Thank you.